live at U of T, what we'd like to do is, I want to be able to analyze the idea of slavery in the Bible, specifically because it was often used as a proof that the Bible, the Torah, condones slavery. And that's why I have a little picture in the corner there of the black slave being branded, right? Because after all, don't we also brand slaves? It's just parsha. We take we take this eved, we pierce his ear, right? So we have to understand what exactly is the Torah's view on slavery. And I think that requires a sense of analysis. I think it requires a lot of thought. And then I think perhaps I even want to suggest that its conclusion has major ramifications to how we view not just slavery, but perhaps an entire body of mitzvot in the Torah. I mean by entire, I mean that many, but at least a whole slew of different mitzvot which are very problematic from a moral, ethical, contemporary way of understanding them. Okay? So, first things first. We have to read the Psukim in the Torah. That's number one, right? So, source number one. These are the laws, these are the statutes that we have to place in front of them. When a person acquires, so this is going to be a very important phrase. In Eved Ivri is translated as a
Hebrew slave.
As a Hebrew slave, right? So hold on to that terminology. Sheish shanim yavod, for 6 years this person will work. Now, why did you pause for that translation? Just because you just paused. Is there a reason?
I didn't realize you were asking.
Are you asking? Okay. Here's what's interesting. In the same pasuk, we have the exact same verb, right? And the same verb is ayin bet dalid. Ayin bet dalid. Now, what does the word ayin bet dalid mean?
Like a noun or a verb.
Well, ayin bet dalid means what?
Work.
It means work. So then how come when I said in Eved Ivri, you told me a slave?
Okay.
Interesting. Because in the exact same pasuk, it has the exact same root word, yet, I think if I opened up many, not just if I asked people, I think if I opened up many different chumashim, I think I would find a change in translation between the word Eved Ivri is often translated as a slave, Sheshanim Yavod is work.
That's because one's a noun and one's a verb. Okay, so why isn't it worker?
Right, so common Eved Ivri is a worker.
But Yavod, can that ever be used as a noun?
Yes, an Eved, meaning in Yud before. We know if there's a root word called Eved, if there's a word, and we put a Yud before it, so we can turn it into a future verb, right? We can do that with Shorshim, we can do it with the word, and often we can turn it into a noun too. Like, for example, a Yishmor is he will guard, and he's a Shomer, he's a guard. I could turn it into a noun.
So are you saying that where it says Sheshanim Yavod?
Although Shomer there's a verb, but what?
Right, so when it says Sheshanim Yavod, are you saying it could mean like for 6 years he will be a slave?
He'll slave away.
I think that the only reason we probably translate it is that we think that avodah is slavery, but we just don't have a verb for it in English. Sheshanim Yavod, for 6 years he will slave away.
So the question is that also really true?
Right.
Because, for example, we're not allowed to do, the pasuk says in the Torah, Kol melechet avodah lo tasu.
Right.
Melechet avodah there does not mean slavery, it means
Work.
work. What I'm trying to argue is that the word Eved doesn't have to mean a black slave, a slave like in Egypt. We're getting pulverized by our taskmasters. It might mean that, it can mean that, it's possible mean that, but it doesn't have to mean that.
But the point here is tikna, you're buying someone. That's the dehumanizing part. That's the violation of rights.
Okay, good.
He doesn't have a choice.
So here we go.
Whether you're working him hard or working him not, you're violating his right
Okay.
to individual freedom.
Great question. This is where we need to understand. How does an Eved Ivri become an Eved Ivri?
Is it only if he steals?
So there are two ways an Eved Ivri becomes an Eved Ivri. One, I steal Miriam's Lamborghini, I smash it up, I don't have insurance. I don't have $250,000 to pay Miriam back. What do I need to do? I need to borrow money. Well, no banks will lend me money. I'm a bit of I'm a convict. I'm a shady guy. So instead, I become Miriam's Eved Ivri. and I basically work for Sheish Shanim for 6 years. A Lamborghini is worth $250,000. I get to live in a house. I get food. I get shelter. And labor. And Miriam gets labor. So I work and I do manual labor, which pays me $20 an hour. Do the mathematics over the course of 6 years. Let's say, for argument's sake, there's $250,000. That's how Miriam gets paid back for the Lamborghini that I just smashed up.
What if
Or
the person doesn't need your labor?
And he sells you for
okay.
the equivalent.
right.
Of that makes sense.
Now, or I went bankrupt. Again, remember the economic system those days was very different, right? I'm bankrupt. I have debts. What am I supposed to do? I have no job. So I say to myself, listen, I have no way of sustaining myself. So instead, I'm going to sell myself as an Eved Ivri. And I'll put myself on the market. Someone will buy me. I'll be able to get room and board and shelter and food and clothing and all of those.
You're absolved.
And then in 6 years from now, I'll be able to go to my own 2 feet and I'll get my own job. I'll open my own franchise or whatever it is, right? So an Eved Ivri is much more about trying to assist someone in economic poverty than it is about. Now, don't get me wrong. They're still tikkunet. They're still acquired. In fact,
and also,
but we'll come back to that because we're going to see a few things coming up next.
imagine it's not 6 years. It's not always 6 years. It's a maximum of
Correct.
6 years.
Right.
Okay, because
Meaning, if I only owe $20,000, I can do it in 6 months.
right. Okay.
Yes. Right. That's a good point. Of course, it's a negotiation of terms.
Yeah.
Right. Which is not very slave-like, is it?
Right.
At least not from the classic slave-like. Right. Like again, in Egypt, there were no terms of slavery. Right. Which is important. Now, so also the end is very strange. What happens, at the end of 6 years, Yitzil Lochav Shichinam, he gets to go free. Exactly what Chinam means, but meaning there's a sense of freedom. What's fascinating is that Rav Hirsch says in number 2, when the Word of God wants us to realize what are the principles of rights and humanness, which it demands for the respect of human beings, it starts off with the criminal. Meaning, Rav Hirsch is saying, if you want to understand the laws of a society, of a civilization, look at how they begin their code of law. So says Rav Hirsch, here's the beginning of the code of law, the Eila Mishpatim, these are the laws, these are the statutes. And we talk about an Eved Ivri, who's at your lowest economic level because he's a criminal. I'll give you an example. He stole a car, he smashed it up. To some extent, it really says a lot about the society. Because the emphasis here is we help out criminals. We don't just, right, and by the end of the first pasuk, the guys are already going free. So first says you can ascribe a lot to a society, but how do they begin their system of law? I don't know if that's a secular idea as well. I don't even know what what's the first law, I guess, in torts or in criminal code or that.
Probably definitions.
Right, definitions. Yeah. You know what I mean? So it's just interesting how the Rav Hirsch says, it says a lot. The fact that it takes, for example, the criminal against property, the criminal in all other states is threatened with direct punishment to the body and freedom. And it shows us what is the treatment that God's idea of rights in his state dictates. Rav Hirsch says, no, this is who we're going to care about. This is what we're going to be concerned with. As opposed to in other places where there's punishment of body and a lack of freedom, here already we're trying to say, no, just because he smashed up his Lamborghini, he still has rights, and he still has it's very specific. This is what the limitations and the parameters, et cetera, et cetera. And yeah.
But this only, this is great, it's all good and nice, but this only relates to an Eved Ivri.
Yeah, Eved Kanani is different.
Yeah.
Different rules. It's a conversation for another time. There's also much less on Eved Kanani. Yes, it's a good question. See, an Eved Kanani is a lot different. An Eved Kanani also gets to go free, called workers' compensation. If Eved Kanani breaks something, a limb, get to go free too. The Yotzei Be'evarim. It's a very different type of system by Eved Kanani. But yes, there's no question. That is true. But again, the whole piercing of the ear, though, is what was often quoted in the southern United States, which is to an Eved Kanani. An Eved Ivri. Right? So, to brand that idea. So, okay, fine, let's go on. Now, what's interesting, I think, is that we have here a case of where the Torah continues to say, okay, that the owner can supply the Eved Ivri with a non-Jewish wife and produce children, and that is actually owned by the owner, and the Eved Ivri can choose, to stay or to leave after 6 years. So if the Eved says, if you take a look at, hey, Im Amor Yomar Eved, I don't want to go free. So what happens? You go to the Beit Din, that's what Elohim here means. You go to the door, the mezuzah, and you pierce the ear of the Eved, and he's a slave forever, which Chazal understood is not forever, and so the Yovel. So, you pierce an ear by the doorpost? That's pretty strange. Why ear? Why doorpost? So, let's take a look at Rashi for a minute. Why the doorpost? So first of all, Rashi tells us Ve'el Mishpatim, we're connecting with Sinai, had to serve the Dibra, last week's Parsha. The Mishpatim were as valid, as important as the Shir Dibra. That's last week's topic a little bit. Number 4. Look at the underlined section. No, I want to just, I want to save time. Turn the page for a second. Let's go to source 13. Third line there. Third line in 13. Why is it we decided to pierce the ear? Why the ear? Answer. Ozen zot sheshamal har Sinai lo tigno valach v'ganav. You heard at Sinai, don't steal, and you stole, we're going to pierce your ear. The guy who sells himself into slavery. The Jewish people are my slaves. And he willingly still went and said, I want my own master. Pierce his ear.
It seems a little bit weird to me that, this is offered as a way to help someone who, went bankrupt or is a criminal or something. This is, a good out for someone. This is considered, a good thing. You're taking someone in, whatever. And then you're, embarrassing them and punishing them for taking up that option. You know what I mean? If I went bankrupt and then I said, okay, I'm going to sell myself to, pay off my debt.
Washing dishes at the restaurant, right? You can't pay the bills, you wash dishes.
Right. And, that's a totally valid, good option to do. And then you're, piercing my ear in this way that's saying, you went against the Torah by taking up this offer that the Torah set out for you.
Okay. You're asking an important question, and you're missing something. But what you're missing is exactly the question.
Okay.
I'll explain. What bothers you is that we're piercing this guy's ear because he stole. But there's a problem with that.
Piercing the guy's ear because he decided to stay as a slave.
Oh, so why does Rashi say that he stole?
That's why he became a slave.
When did this guy steal the Lamborghini?
6 years ago.
6 years ago. So, you mean to tell me that because the guy stole a Lamborghini 6 years ago, we pierce his ear now? That's weird. It's you take your parents' car, you break curfew, and 6 years later, your parents are like, you can't get the car this weekend, because 6 years ago, you came back at 2 o'clock in the morning.
But isn't what it's saying is we're piercing your ear because you decided to stay, not because you stole. You became a slave because you stole.
What?
You became a slave because you stole, but because you chose to stay a slave, that's why we're piercing your ear.
So that's true. Why? But you stole 6 years ago. So why now you're piercing his ear? Pierce him in year 1.
Piercing has nothing to do with stealing.
But that's all Rashi says.
Well, I guess I was talking more about the second one.
I'm talking about the first one.
Okay.
Second one we'll deal with in a minute.
Okay.
I don't understand. What do you mean? A guy stole a Lamborghini, and therefore he needs to work to pay off the Lamborghini. You went to a restaurant, you ate their food, you can't pay, you have to wash the dishes.
Maybe it's saying you paid off your debt, and then 6 years later you're complaining about something that resulted from you stealing. You're complaining, I really want to be with my kids and my wife. And it's like, I'm just reminding you why you have to make this hard decision about staying with your wife, and it's because of that original stealing.
Of 6 years ago.
So now we're reminding you, because it's not a punishment right now, it's just a consequence.
There's another problem. What does lo tignov mean in Sota Dibra?
Don't kidnap.
So what's going on here? That's what Rashi says in source 15. Lo tignov begonev nevashot hakatuv medaber. So how could Rashi in source 15, last is parsha, say lo tignov means kidnapping, and then in source 13, and this is parsha, he quotes lo tignov to justify why he stole, justify why to pierce his ear, the Lamborghini that he did.
But is he really talking about theft of, like, I want to say chattel, whatever the non-legal, like, theft of things? Or is he talking about kidnapping? Like, is he talking about a Jewish person who kidnapped someone, or is he talking about a Jewish person who stole a car?
So what do you...
He has to be consistent. So if he says Tignov is
so
kidnap, then...
if 15 means lo tignov means don't kidnap, when Rashi quotes the Gemara, which is what that is, Gemara and Kiddushin, at the end of year 6, why are we piercing his ear? Because he kidnapped. Who did he kidnap?
His wife and children.
Who did he kidnap? He didn't kidnap his wife and children.
No, because now his wife and children are owned by someone else.
Wife and children are owned by someone else.
That's a whole other issue.
Okay, we'll get there. Maybe. Fifth time.
Did he kidnap?
Again, who did he kidnap? It's now, he says to the court, I love my wife and my kids and my master, I want to stay. My non-Jewish wife, my non-Jewish kids, I want to stay. We pierced his ear. Because he kidnapped.
Because
he
the only person
very good.
that I don't understand.
He kidnapped himself. How did he kidnap himself? Because he could have become free, but instead chose to remain a slave. He kidnapped himself. And when did he kidnap himself? Now, not 6 years earlier. So when Rashi says, Lo tignov, what does he mean? He's kidnapping. Sure, of course he's kidnapping himself. What's the idea here? That to become, the first 6 years, the fact that you had to be a slave because you smashed Lamborghini, okay, it's not the best thing in the world. But now in your own volition, you heard in her Sinai that there's only one master. Kili b'nei Yisrael avadim. And you chose to have another master. Therefore, pierce your ear.
His wife and children become Eved Knanim?
Knanim. Yeah, but his wife's not Jewish. His kids aren't Jewish.
Right.
It's not a real marriage.
So these two proofs are not like two separate reasons. It's one reason.
Exactly.
Okay.
Now, interesting. What I'm trying to tease out from here is that I want to get what is the Torah's impression of slavery. Is it a positive thing or a negative thing? So the first 6 years, maybe one could argue it's what's called an economic reality, a social reality, where people make mistakes, people steal cars, people don't pay back.
Better than the jail system.
It's better than the jail system.
But how do you trust people in your house after they stole? We lock them up because we don't trust them.
I guess.
Maybe this is a community rehabilitation.
Yeah. Right.
It's like a halfway
Take the criminal who stole your car. Right, he stole your car. I just heard on the radio that now because cars are basically computers, people could actually hack into your car by using their iPhone. If they know what to do, they can get the frequency.
With electronic starters, you can hack it.
Right.
Yeah.
You can track my car sold as an electronic starter. I have a remote radio starter. Maybe they can hack that too. I don't know.
That would be
Probably.
freaky.
It's okay. My car's sold. If they steal it, we could get more money in insurance. So what's fascinating is that we're trying to understand what is the Torah's impression about slavery. So there's two things I want to highlight here. There's what's called the economic reality, which is what I'm really trying to push, right? I.e., the Torah recognizes sometimes there's realities, things happen, we deal with them, we don't incarcerate them, we don't beat them up. We say, okay, look, you need to work to pay off a debt. You smashed up someone's Lamborghini. Second, when you have an option, don't become a slave. Is not something which we condone.
But we're saying that we don't condone it because Hashem told us not to, that he's Hashem, and we shouldn't be a slave. Right. Not because we think that slavery is inherently not.
Okay. Stage 2 is, what does the word eved? Is eved like a positive word or negative? So we see from here.
Rashi says that we are avadim Hashem.
Hashem.
Does he say that?
Yeah, sure.
I wasn't concentrating.
If you flip back.
He leave me shall avadim.
It's a pasuk in the Torah, it's not Rashi, right? I mean, Rashi quotes a pasuk.
Yeah.
What I'm trying to say is the word eved doesn't have to mean, it doesn't necessarily have this negative connotation to it. When we say Sheshlim Yavod Vashvi Ki Tikne Eved Ivri, to some extent, the word eved is not necessarily latent with negative stereotypes, that it elicits a negative, detrimental idea. First of all, Moshe Rabbeinu was called an Eved Hashem. If you take a look, in Source 9.
There was like serfdom, right?
Yeah, of course.
So
Rashi lives in the 12th century.
So for him to even say that, like,
11th century.
to say this is like revolutionary. And it was he lived in the medieval world.
Of course, 1035.
So like, yeah, it kind of seems revolutionary for him to even say.
Of course, no, it's very revolutionary. There's no question. For something like Rashi, this is unheard of. This is not coming at a time of freedom of slaves. The opposite, right?
Well,
this is you're a slave for life.
And we're still talking about avadim ivrim.
And Eved Ivri, right? Yes.
We haven't talked about Canaan.
Yeah, we're not going to get the Canaan today. Remind me, we'll get there another time, right?
Can I tell you about ear piercing? That's related to slavery.
Yeah.
It always like weirded me out that like in Orthodox Judaism, piercing your ears is like a totally acceptable thing. Like no one pierces anything else, but everyone pierces their ears.
Yeah.
I never understood why like why would that be an acceptable thing when it has such a negative connotation in the Torah?
First of all, it's only for men, not for women.
Okay, but still, like it's.
And it's probably, I think, in a different location.
But I don't know, like. It just seems weird to me that it's such a socially acceptable thing, whereas like other things are just like kind of mentioned in the Torah, but like not really in such a negative way, and like
correct, like really mentioned
in
the
that.
Right.
Like
Here's like
shota, the hair covering, and it's like you gotta cover your hair, and then it's like pierce slaves doing it.
Yeah, I don't know. It's a good question.
At least
the whole piercing in general is a conversation for another time. It's a good question. The answer is because first of all, it's only an Eved Kanani, it's not an Eved. It's not. An Eved Ivri, first of all, it's not an Eved Kanani, nor is it a female. It's not an Ivriya. No, because only women pierce their ears. I mean, it's only socially acceptable for women to pierce their ears in Judaism.
I guess.
Orthodox Judaism.
But like, it almost makes more sense to me that like Orthodox women should like pierce their eyebrows instead. Like, why you're like, because that's not like that.
I think it came just through cultural.
Yeah.
Like it was very acceptable to pierce your ears, and there was nothing wrong with it in the Torah. So.
Except for this.
Maybe for
but that's for men.
For women versus men, it's very different. Here, if you had an Eved Ivri that was a woman.
Am I Ivriya?
Yeah.
When she's 12, she gets to leave. She's not allowed to have.
Would you ever pierce your ear?
No.
What if a woman is like stealing? What happens to her? A woman goes bankrupt. A woman steals something.
Her dad has to deal with it.
Her
husband has to deal with it.
She doesn't have like a male half.
Then there's no such thing. You cannot have
repercussions.
No, a Ma'ivriya goes free the moment she becomes a mature adult.
But if she commits the crime when she's already a mature adult,
so it's just to pay. But there's no slavery by
it's not slavery. She works without, I guess.
Yeah. By the way,
No, going back to the ear piercing. So it's when you're piercing the man's ear, it's like it's nothing to do with like a sign of beauty. It's just like a mark for him.
Right.
But for women to do it, it's not even related so much.
It just seems
it's like one of them is for beauty, and one of them is for a man to do it as a mark for something he did, and a choice he made.
I don't know if the association is.
Let's go on. Now, what's also interesting, I think, is that the Gemara looks at having an Eved Ivri in source 7 as they quote the pasuk when it talks about slavery, repeats talking about slavery in Sefer Dvarim, and there it says Ki tov lo imcha b'machal imcha b'mishteh shelo teh ata ochel pat nekiya v'ochel pat kever ata shoteh yain yashen v'yishteh yain chadash lo yashen al gebei mochim v'yashen al gebei atefen. It can't be that the master is having bread and that the slave is having stale bread. The owner is having fresh water, and the slave is having last week's water. No. And so much so, the Gemara says, Kol koneh eved ivri ke koneh adon latzmo. It's as if you're acquiring a master for yourself. Because there's only one bed, the Eved gets it, not you. Which is revolutionary. Right? Meaning that there's this entire notion of, so what's the difference between an Eved and a worker?
I think an Eved has it better, except that he can leave.
Who?
The Eved has it better than a worker, except that the worker can leave and the Eved can't.
Very good.
The Eved can leave, he just has to pay back the debt that he owes.
Right, but he can't leave until he pays the debt.
Right,
the worker doesn't owe debt.
So here's the difference is, if you hire a worker can leave in the middle of the day, no problem. If he was supposed to play at a wedding and now there's someone to play at a wedding, okay, there's like other compensation issues, which is a story for another time, probably the Tuesday Texting Torah Challenge, right? But that's the only difference, and that's what the Gemara says. Poel yachol source 10 yachol lachzor ba'afil b'chatzai yom, and a slave cannot. An Eved Ivri is not responsible for his time. His time is controlled by somebody else. That really is what an Eved is, which is why, what is the first mitzvah that we're given as a national entity? Our first national mitzvah was, as a national entity, was Kiddush HaChodesh, right? Because time is what defines a free person. A free person says, I have no time for this, I have no time for that. That means they're free. A slave has all the time in the world, right? I don't do it today, I'll do it later. It doesn't matter. Today, tomorrow, yesterday are all the same for a slave. Whereas a free person, as you all know when it comes to studying and midterms and stuff, you never have enough time because you're free, right? So that really is the only difference between the two. So what's interesting, I think, is that we have a situation where the Torah is clearly saying the Eved is not ideal. We do not condone slavery. It is something which we need to curtail. Now, what would happen after 6 years? The slave is debating. Stay a slave, don't stay a slave. Stay a slave, don't stay a slave. What do I do? He goes to his rabbi. He says, Rabbi, what do I do? What should the rabbi say? Leave. But is it a mitzvah in the Torah to be a slave? Meaning, you mean to tell me that it's negative to be a slave? But so the question is, so why are all these mitzvot? Why not instead say, no Eved Ivri to begin with? Just like there's no Ama Ivriyah past the age of 12. When a woman becomes an adult, a mature halachic adult, so she's 12, she's 12 and a half, whatever the case is, she cannot be a female slave. So why not abolish all the rules? Why have it at all? Just make people in debt. You pay it off, okay. So you work 9 to 5 and you'll pay it off, but why even call it slave?
Why should it be different than a guy working to pay off his debt?
Right.
Yeah, why is it even an option?
Why is it even an option? Just get rid of everything.
Because there's special protection laws?
So you're right. You could argue there's special protection laws, that we want to protect the guy because we want to give him a chance. And by the way, when a slave goes free after 6 years, you know what he gets? There's a mitzvah of anakah, there's a mitzvah to give him presents when he leaves. Why? Because when we left Egypt, what did we get? We also got presents when we left. Remember, we did that a long, long time ago, right? We need to treat slaves the same way we ended up being treated. Why that had to be that way is a whole conversation for another time. But we know what it's like, and therefore you need to give your slave a little bit of money so that when he leaves, he can put a down payment in a house, or he can start his own franchise, or start a job, or start a business because he has something besides just dignity. He has a bit of cash in hand. So I would like to argue that there are 630 mitzvot in the Torah. The vast majority aren't applicable today because, unfortunately, we don't live in Israel. I'm not a Kohen. You're not a king. Neither of us are kings. So if that's all true, I would like to suggest that maybe there are certain mitzvot that potentially could be applicable today, or that are just in the Torah in general, that were created not as an ideal, but to deal with human reality. Meaning, not all mitzvot are ideal. I'll give you 2 examples which you agree with me easily. Are you allowed to steal? No. It says lo tignovu. What happens if I steal a phone? I'm like, you know what? I should have done it. So I go back to owner and I give back to owner. I fulfill a biblical mitzvah in the Torah called ve'eshiv et agzela shelakach. I am returning shiv, tshuva, right? Giving back the stolen item that I took. I fulfilled the mitzvah. Wait a second.
But you shouldn't go pursue that mitzvah on a regular basis.
It doesn't mean I should steal so that I can fulfill the mitzvah of ve'eshiv et agzela shelakach. That's preposterous. That's ridiculous. It's absurd. But what's the answer? The answer is the Torah recognizes that sometimes people steal. Option for a person to become a Baal Tshuva. Person just say, regret stealing. And if you regret stealing and you return the item, you fulfill a biblical commandment, which clearly is not ideal. It can't be ideal because you're violating another commandment called Lo Tignovu. We have another example. Maybe a little less obvious, but not that much less obvious. Couple gets married. They decide, so now we're going to want to get divorced. Torah says, "V'katav la sefer krituv v'natan biyada." You write a divorce, you bill divorce, you give it to her, and you're divorced. You fulfill a mitzvah in the Torah by the get. You can't tell me that's ideal.
Yeah, but the way you're defining mitzvah is like you get a mitzvah candy every time you do a mitzvah, so it's like a good thing to do this. It's not like it's a good thing to do this mitzvah. It's like if you need to divorce your wife, you must give her a get. If you steal something, you must give
excellent. It back. So this is where it really bothered me. Someone sent me an email that said, "Oh, here's a mitzvah. A mitzvah means a good deed. A mitzvah doesn't mean a good deed. Mitzvah means a commandment." Now, I just showed you that first of all, a mitzvah commandment can't mean a good deed. That's a given. For this crowd, I think that's obvious. But I even want to show you that there are many commandments in the Torah which are not ideal. Maybe one could argue, I'll give you 2 other examples that you're maybe familiar with. One is called an Eshet, Yifat Torah. You go to jail, you see this lady, you want to marry her, she's taken captive, she has to let her hair grow, she has to do this, she has to do that, da. Another example, according to certain Rishonim, maybe appointing a king. Mitzvah, non-mitzvah, positive, negative. What I'm trying to show is there are certain mitzvot in the Torah that not only are they not ideal, but a person should wish they never have to fulfill them ever, because the Torah condemns such behavior.
Can you say like bring a korban? Like a korban that you have to bring because you did something wrong. Like,
Right. A korban chata. Right, for sure.
Or even relating back to the king, the korban in the first place, some say that it's just to fulfill a human desire.
Right. Yeah, I'm not convinced. This is the Rambam that I'm not sure exactly that's what he meant, but yes, exactly. I mean, what I'm trying to argue is, when it comes to divorce, returning something stolen, those are kind of obvious ones. Maybe one could even say something more extreme, and that is, let's even include an Eved Ivri in that category. Meaning, if you go to your rabbi and say, "Rabbi, should I continue being an Eved Ivri? Should I get in it?" The answer is no, it's not. Abolishing slavery is something which we fight for. Just like we fight for not stealing. Just like we fight for don't get married if you're going to get divorced. Right? So maybe one can argue that is true. But this way, you want to tell me, oh, okay, but why do we have any of the mitzvot in general? The answer is, well, we have mitzvot about stealing. We have mitzvot about Eshefat Torah. We have many mitzvot in the Torah which are not ideal, and we wish we never had to do them. But the Torah deals with human realities, especially if you go back 1,000 years, especially if you go back 2,000 years. right? Which is a totally different economic, social construct, reality, and everything.
So why some human realities does the Torah forbid, like wanting to take your neighbor's wife, and the other ones it says, okay, you can do it like Isha Yifat.
So that is the $1 million question. There's certain. So I think at some way, you know yourself as a good educator. Sometimes you say red line, absolutely not, never, ever, and sometimes you can't always say no. At some point in time, you must under direct. Yeshivat Torah, again, if we had more time, I'd show you the...
Pretty weird.
But again, Yeshivat Torah, I mean, that case is more than... It's totally whacked.
So who says
right?
that Eved Ivri is comparable to the Yeshivat Torah and all the...
Nobody. It's a theory.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
The category makes sense, but it just... And, like, obviously we're not the ones who are making these laws, but it seems like... Eved Ivri, to me, seems like more reasonable... And like taking a female captive and
but Rashi himself says it's not ideal. The first Rashi is what? Look at source 17, top line. Lo dibra Torah ela keneged yetzer hara. That some Yeshivat Torah in 17. That sometimes the Torah has to deal with a human being.
But like if you're gonna forbid, just seems whatever. This is like a whole different discussion. But
yes.
If you're gonna forbid like a man from taking someone else's wife. Why is it any different if, like, he took her captive? Like, it seems
because
like you're not giving her enough credit here.
Because at the end of the day...
Even if she's married?
No.
You can't take a married woman.
Okay, fine, but...
even a single woman, like, it seems like a violation of rights.
Right.
Yeah, like, just, I don't know. Whatever. Like, obviously...
Meaning, here's the problem.
But,
the problem, I believe, in Yeshivat Torah is that you're doing it for the wrong reasons.
what?
You're doing it because she's good looking. You're not doing it because she's going to bring up a wonderful Jewish household. Which is why, remember, with the next parsha.
You can't see a woman and decide you want to marry her.
So that's exactly why the Torah.
Without consent, it's assault.
Right. That's why the Torah is I believe, when.
Like,
here's something else the Torah does really well. The Torah is really good at giving you its opinion without giving you its opinion directly. Meaning, Ace, good guy or bad guy. It doesn't ever say Esav, Rasha, Haya. It's always ambiguous. Intentionally, it wants you to think and figure it out. And so that, I believe, is also true, but in Esher Sifat Torah. Why are you bringing your house first for 30 days? Not... shaving her head. Why are you leaving her in her rags and not allowed to change her clothing? Why let her cry so that you'd be like, okay, what am I doing? Go back home. So when the Torah screams and yells, I believe it's more educationally valid and much more powerful if the Torah human beings, instead of saying don't do this, don't do that, is for you to come to certain realizations on your own. So what does the Torah do? The Torah tries in 17,000 different ways for you to realize it. And sometimes you don't, and you're going to learn the hard way. It says that, what does the Gemara learn? What's the next parsha of Yeshivat Torah? Lisa ben Sora Moreh. Gemara says why? Because eventually you're going to get a situation of an Yeshivat Torah. Then you're going to have a wife that you like and that you don't like, and then you're going to distinguish citizens, and that's going to lead to tension. That you're going to want to lead and then it leads to then it's going to lead to a case where you have a rebellious son. And the rabbis are familiar. What's the connection between all three of them? The answer is that's the connection, right? So the Torah itself screams and yells, "Don't do it." So sometimes the Torah says, "Don't do this. Don't murder. Don't commit adultery. Don't eat pig." And sometimes the Torah doesn't do that because there's a little bit of room and it wants you to either come to your conclusion on your own and realize. You could even argue, and this is maybe even more extreme, you're allowed to have more than one wife. The answer is yes. The Torah says you have more than one wife. So how come very few, before the Takan of Rabbeinu Gershom cannot get up and say, that's it, one wife only, when half the community has more than one wife. That's not going to work. So he's getting up and he's issuing a declaration of something which most B'tcherim did anyways. You don't see Tanaim and Amoraim with one wife.
Why would you need declaration if it was...
No, so you obviously had some that did it, or else you wouldn't need declaration. But it could have been that prevalent. And we don't see Tanaim and Amoraim who do it. We don't see examples. We don't see Rashi. We don't see Rashi have more than one wife. We don't see, the Gonim talking about... So other cases, yeah, but they're so rare. So therefore, if you take a look at the Torah, any guy with one wife, that just causes trouble. In Tanakh, right? So at the same time, it's hinting and suggesting, look, it's going to allow you to have more than one wife. Why? 25% of women died in childbirth. A single woman had no economic hope in the ancient world. None. Zero. So if they weren't married, they were in big trouble, especially because their dad was probably dead. So what exactly are they supposed to do in life, if not be married? So the fact that a husband have more than one wife also helped women just from a practical, economic, sociological perspective. Which today, a single woman can make a lot of money on her own. She doesn't need a man to do that anymore. But that wasn't the case a few hundred years ago. So to some extent, is it ideal? No, but it has to deal with not the Torah deals with human beings. The Torah lives in a non-ideal world.
So what's the distinction? Like, there's probably no answer to this question, but like, there's obviously a difference between the mitzvot that the Torah says, like,
yes,
okay, you really shouldn't do it, but if you need
you're
it,
right.
here's how you do
So
it.
you're right. So I'm treading a little bit on, thin ice, because when you apply that, you apply the korbanot, right? You go to the korbanot. So you ask a very good question. The easy answer, which is not so easy, is the Torah. If the Torah screams and shouts that it's not ideal because it alludes to it, then that's an obvious one. Meaning, having more than one wife is not ideal because Tanakh alludes to it. Because every time a guy has more than one wife, it's tzaras.
But I guess my question is like, when
It's subtle.
but
it's not
why?
so simple.
Like, why does the Torah? What's the distinction? Like, why does the Torah say this? We're going to tell you straight out, and this we're gonna we're just going to hint to you. You really shouldn't do it.
Because at the end of the day, why can't you have a slave? In the olden days, okay, not today. Put yourself back 2,000 years ago. Why can't you have a slave? What's wrong with having a slave?
Why not?
Why not? That's like the way it goes. It's like I have a fish
So
at
you're
home.
saying it's like
Why can't I have a slave?
Is it ever
Social
acceptability?
Like that's
It was the only Lincoln abolished slavery. When was that? A couple hundred years ago.
You're saying if it
Wasn't like we live in a world that slavery
idol
is
worship was
Because you're-
rampant, and that's a clear no. What?
right because
idol worship.
yes,
Yeah.
because that's a moral religious construct that has to be an absolute.
Right, that's not like a natural thing. People like not to take someone's wife. I think is a natural like
Yeah,
you
naturally
come
you
to
want
that
to.
conclusion.
I mean, Bill do it all the
Like
time.
the world would know that's wrong. Even
Why?
if
That's not true. Consenting adults. If he agrees and she agrees, why can't you have adultery?
because well,
The husband agrees
to
to have his wife. Yes, it's consulting. And if not, what the husband owns the wife?
Then, not
Today.
Not today.
Oh,
But
not
like
talking
2,000
about today.
years ago, there were certain constructs like idol worship where people wouldn't understand. Like it's not like a natural thing. Like
I feel like idol worship is a natural thing.
that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
It wasn't a natural thing for people to say, oh, it's wrong. But there are certain things that people naturally said is wrong, so the Torah is like, yeah, that is wrong.
Well,
Right?
church is the best example. Every society had laws of murder. Again,
The
what
Torah's
is
not gonna
definition?
say, everyone does it. If you want to do it, here's the ideal. It's like everyone knows stealing, that killing is wrong.
Stealing
Everyone
too.
knows that taking someone's wife is
So
wrong.
then, it should be almost opposite. Like, if it's obvious that we know that stealing is wrong, why
So the
should
Torah should say it's better not to do it. It should I think it's the Torah saying things.
No, the
about
Torah, but careful,
realities
because the
that-
Torah will also say no shatnez.
Okay.
Like the
Not-
Torah doesn't just do that.
It's really bad for you.
Right, no
Okay,
pig.
shatnez is
What's wrong with pig? Meaning, so there are certain things that it's not so easy to figure out why, right?
So the answer is we don't know. We don't
Yeah.
So
He
that's
doesn't know.
that's where it's. I think the Torah has to allow something, yet you need to be able to find clear proof that it really is discouraging it, despite the fact that it's allowing it. You know what I mean? Like sometimes as parents, as adults, we allow our kids to do certain things. We don't really want them to make decisions, but at the end of the day, either we want them to do it so that they'll learn from their mistakes, or they realize it on their own because it's more powerful than always saying no. Or you know what? It's not ideal. This kid just needs it. This kid just needs it. What am I supposed to do? I don't want the other kid to do it, but that kid just needs it. There are exceptions. So again, what they are and when they are requires a lot of education and insight and analysis, and they do exist, and I think it's an important way of understanding. And first of all, I think it's important to look at the Torah, that you have to understand the timeline that it was written in, the construct that it was written for, the audience that it was written for, and that's very important.
It's completely timeless since like.
But it's not timeless. I think that there are certain principles in the Torah that are timeless, but there's no way you can tell. I'll give you a classic example. The Gemara even says there's no Avodah Zarah already by the time of Bayesheni. The time of Avodah Zarah is gone. So you mean to tell me there's times in the Torah that are anti-Avodah Zarah? Yeah, they're not applicable anymore. But you're timeless. So that's when the rabbis say, no, but Avodah Zarah also is about your ego. It's about giving, it's about sports, Sometimes the rabbi says it's about sports, Avodah Zarah. The internet's about Sarah. You know what I mean? What I'm trying to say is that they try to apply, again, right or wrong. It's not funny. We cannot joke about it, right? But so we try to apply the constructs of the modern era and the principles.
Why would Torah be written this?
Because I think because at the end of the day, the Torah needs to be meaningful and relevant to the people that it was given to, and still be meaningful and relevant today. Does that mean that an Asherah is relevant today to me? What do I care about an Asherah being planted? I don't care. It doesn't matter. Right? Even I'll give you an example. Ben Sora and Moreh. The Gemara says, Lo hayav lo never. Never happened. Why is it there? The Torah made a law that never happened. That's a waste of time. Meaning, don't eat pig. We've never seen a pig. Pigs don't exist, but don't eat pig. What? That's strange. So what's the idea of Ben Sora and Moreh? Why? It's talking about rebellious son. If it's not going to happen, who in the world? And the Gemara makes it almost impossible to happen. So it's clear that a lot of things about the Torah, it's about learning, it's about studying, it's about application, of course. But just to say that, no, we can draw exactly the way it was at times the Torah is applicable today, it's not true. We need a bit of creativity and a little of understanding how it works out. And interpretation. That's exactly what the Rishonim try to do. So, let's stop there for today, but I think it's a lot, definitely food for thought. Next week we're off because it's reading week.